Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we take a look back at the first 10 games of the season. 10 games that did not go as planned. A 2-8 record for the Bucks to open up the season. So what has been the biggest or some of the biggest issues, and how do you move forward and start to dig out of this 2-8 hole? Camille and I dive into it next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. And your favorite podcast now has a newsletter as we introduce the new Locked On Bucks daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered directly to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. 2-8, Camille, to start the season. 2-8, not what we obviously envisioned. Doc Rivers, I know, said before the Celtics game, I don't know what I expected us to be, but it wasn't this. And, you know, when we pointed to when the schedule came out, hey, it's a pretty difficult first 10 games, we think, all things considered, and started to entertain what would a bad 10-game stretch be for the Bucks. I think we landed on like 5-5.
Yeah,
like
500.
Yeah, if you're 5-5, or God forbid 4-6, that's a pretty bad start. Well, you're 2-8, and those two wins are against a team that at the time had the worst record in the league, or tied for you with the worst record in the league, in the Utah Jazz, and the Philadelphia 76ers on opening night, who didn't have Joel Embiid or Paul George. It's the second time in less than a week, Camille, that the Bucks are going to be playing a team, and it is going to be a matchup between the two worst records in the league. And we're beyond the first week of the regular season. Like this, none of us expected to see coming. So when you see the 2-8 start, I guess there's a number of ways to go here, but does it change or how much? I mean, it does. Obviously, it should. How much does it change expectations for you?
Well, it shows me that maybe the ceiling of this team wasn't as high as I initially thought that it was. Going into the season, I was very, very optimistic about this team. I thought that this team could really come out of the East. And I'm not saying that that's impossible at this point, but they just haven't put anything on tape at this point, 10 games into the season, to make me feel more confident about my preseason prediction. And when I'm looking at this team, it's one of those things where it's like you're watching the game, and it's some of the same issues that we've seen under a few coaches when it comes to, boxing out, grabbing rebounds, executing properly, transition defense, a lot of the same things we've been talking about, which makes it even more disappointing to me. The only silver lining, if I'm looking for one, which I have been, to be very clear, with this team being 2-8, is the fact that the rest of the East has also been struggling to start the season, where you only have two teams above 500. And that means you're about 3 games out of the third seed being 2-8. So that's the only saving grace for me when looking at the Bucks team and thinking about the ways that this team can get better. I've been seeing, Doc try different rotations, have been seeing when the team plays against better competition, their effort level, their focus level tends to be higher. Although we haven't seen it for a full game, it's higher. So I can still see the outlines of what I was looking at in the offseason of reasons for optimism and reasons why I thought this team could be a contender. But they really got to start showing something.
I mean, that's like the big part to me, is how quickly things change. I remember way back when the 2019-20 season, especially when they were at one point on pace to win 73 games, and they just had so many of these moments where I remember one specifically against the Charlotte Hornets where they were down by maybe 20, and you just knew, all right, maybe they lose, but they're not going to lose by 20. There's a run that's coming here. And before you knew it, they go on the run, they win the game. I used to joke that year with Eric Name and Kane before games about like what did we call it? The tsunami would always come with the Bucks, that you knew at some point, here it comes. Is it just going to be large enough to wipe out the rest of the land? And the adage and what we all pointed to back then was you have to play 48 minutes to beat the Bucks. And what we're seeing now is the Bucks have to play 48 minutes to beat teams. Like not even the Celtics. You needed to play 48 minutes to beat the Utah Jazz. Like that's the reality of where we currently are at. And to your point, I think by and large, if we just look back at the last 2 weeks and I know this is week 4 ish of the regular season. Maybe it's sort of week 5. I don't even remember now because of how this season is going. But really starting with that Celtics game, for the most part, they've been competitive and they've been in these games. They're just not winning those games. And that's, again, the 48-minute piece of you played a great 24 minutes against the Celtics. I think a lot of us probably thought going into halftime, wish this was larger than 11, the way that we're shooting the ball and they are, but you know what? You're up, so I'll take it. And whether it's the second quarter or third quarter, it's been one of the two. And it's seemingly every game that there's just a problematic quarter for the Bucks in 36 minutes, or even if it's half of a quarter and you get like 40 to 42 minutes of solid play. At this point, it's just not good enough with this group.
It's not. I mean, they have the 19th ranked offense, the 26th ranked defense after 10 games here. A far cry of where we thought that this team could be, especially looking at the offensive side, 19th in the league. One of the things that we talked about in the preseason going into the season was just like, if they can continue to be an elite offense, top 7, top 3rd in the league, somewhere in there, and then just have an average defense, like they might be really cooking with something here. And to see that they have the 19th ranked offense, the 26th ranked defense, like they weren't even that bad defensively last season. Even if you look at the part just under Griff alone, they were the 21st ranked defense. Doc came in, they were the 14th ranked, finished the season as a 19th ranked defense. Like they have to figure out a way to execute better and also figure out what the right personnel is. And I understand they don't have Khris Middleton. So for some of like the bigger games against more of the competitive teams like the Celtics, like the Cavaliers, you can feel Chris's absence a bit more, but I still feel like even though he's not there, even though it's a top-heavy team, that they have enough to have beaten some of the teams that they lost to already this season, which, again, doesn't make me feel great about this team as it currently stands. Of course, things can change as you go on in the season, but we're just talking about the first 10 games, how they stand. And they had a problem last season putting away teams that you look on paper or even the odds say, hey, this is the team the Bucks should beat. And you're seeing that carry over into this season during a time when this team needs to be desperate for wins as well.
Yeah, it's you brought up a couple of things that I do want to touch on because I've heard a lot of what I think is just misinformed criticisms of this team. Like, I'm not saying they haven't warranted criticism, but I think we're looking in the wrong place with a lot of these criticisms and where this team needs to improve. So we'll get into that conversation, as you can see on the sidebar as well. And I've seen some people mention in the comments the Damian Lillard component now, that you'll play, I would assume, at least the next 2 games without Damian Lillard, who was placed in concussion protocol last night, and some of the young guys in what we've seen from that group. So we will get into that conversation coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about Mint Mobile. As big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were going to be paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer, your new 3-month wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds above, slower, or above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And so you mentioned the defense and where they currently fit in and rank, Camille. I've seen and heard a lot of the same refrain with this group of defense is a disaster and its perimeter. And what do you know? Another guard went off against the Bucks. I think Tim Bontemps is the one that'll bang that drum the loudest. I don't look. It's not a great perimeter defense. I'm not trying to say, hey, the defense is actually better than you would think, but I don't think the defense has largely been the problem. That Celtics game on Sunday, the defense played, all right. They played well enough to beat the Boston Celtics and keep you in the game. We had the same conversation after the first Cavs game of, hey, your defense did everything it could. It kept you in the game. And you've started to see more and more of that. The reality is this team is going to have a top 5 at worst offense. That's where it sits. If these are the expectations for your defense, that means the offense has to be elite. And the numbers that you read off and the eye test, it has been anything but elite so far. Mm-hmm. That is the biggest issue. So when people say Khris Middleton isn't going to fix anything with this group, he doesn't help the defense. Maybe not. Fine. He might not help the defense, but Khris Middleton's got to help the offense. And for the time being, you are in a place where you just simply need to outscore your opponents to win games. And that's where he will help you. Now, is that as soon as Khris Middleton comes back, this is going to be a top 5 offense, and here we go? No, it's still going to take work, but it's not like, well, let's throw our hands in the air because there's no way we're even improving with Khris back.
Yeah, it all works together. It all works together because, again, like we mentioned, we expected this to be a Bucks team with an elite offense and at least an average defense. And we're like, that combination should work to get them pretty far in the playoffs here. But we've also seen with this team when the offense isn't falling for them, when it's not working for them, the defense also tends to suffer. Like the Bucks, and Doc Rivers has talked about this himself of saying we got to find ways when the offense, when the shots aren't falling, to still make sure that we are locked in defensively as well. So sometimes the offense leads to bad defense for the Bucks for a few different reasons. Either, the missed shots lead the other team to go in transition, they get to run, either that or the Bucks are just not as focused and dialed in defensively. But Khris Middleton's return, I know that some people are always saying like, doesn't help the defense. And yeah, he's not as fast as he was, doesn't have lateral quickness. And that's been the way for a couple of years with Khris Middleton now, since the injuries really started coming afoot for him. But one thing that Khris does have is a really good IQ. And sometimes defensively for this team, I think a lot of it is just like they don't understand what they should be doing and they're overthinking it and they're getting out of position, not able to react as quickly as they need to. So I do think Khris helps defensively in that sense, at least of having another high IQ player on the court, somebody who can, direct the troops, and also really want to see what it looks like if the Bucks go smaller more often. We've talked about how Giannis doesn't really want to play center, but we've heard Doc Rivers talk about how he wants to explore that a bit more, especially once Khris comes back. So I do wonder if the Bucks going smaller for some looks can help juice up the offense and the defense for him going forward.
A lot of, and I agree, and I think that's kind of what we're waiting on, and I get where Giannis is at, and we've heard that, we've talked about this for a while now. But I think we're moving closer and closer to the reality is, look, this is what the league is, and this is what we need you to do. You still have Brook Lopez, you still have Bobby Portis to eat some of those minutes, but we're moving further down the road towards we just need more of you as the 5. and we can play smaller. We can put more offense out there to keep up or juice our offense and give us some more switchability on the perimeter. But this is moving towards where it's an inevitable conversation that I think we're going to eventually come to here. There's two teams that have been kicked around a lot in terms of comparisons for this Bucks team. Everybody points back to, well, the 2022-23 Los Angeles Lakers started 2-10.
They did.
And they finished
Big
43 and 39. Right. I mean, that Lakers team, those first 12 games was as bad as it gets. They were dead last in offensive rating. Their defensive rating was 17th, but there are a lot of teams that were bunched up in that mix. Darvin Ham was the head coach. They did not have a pretty net rating. Their net rating was third to last in the league, and that really speaks to how bad the offense was. They turned it around. They made trades is the big piece there. Even the 2001 Milwaukee Bucks, our beloved team that started 3-9, and a lot of questions of why isn't this working? This team was just in the playoffs 2 straight years. We thought this was going to be the launching point, and they're 3-9.
It was healthy to start the season as well.
And they were healthy, and 3-9 starts. They rise from the ashes to finish the season 52-30, which would be a remarkable turnaround for the Bucks to even sniff that this season, given the Cavs and Celtics. I mean, I know you've already gotten the bulk of your games out of the way with them, but they exist. The Western Conference, where it's at, exists. So I don't think 50 wins is a realistic expectation. Like at this point, I was talking with with Jim Ozarski the other day before the game, and he was telling me someone in his office was saying, like, already prepping the sky is falling panic pieces that we need to write, and telling him, like, look, what if they're 15-15? Like, that's a big issue. And he had to stop him and say, guys, if they're 15-15, it means they will have gone 13-7 to pull out of that. So that's a pretty good spot to be in at this point. But that's, that's where you are. You mentioned there's only 2 teams with a winning record. There's only 3 teams that are 500 or better. So you are 3 games back of the crazy 3 seed. And you look at that, you look at the schedule in front of you, and you just say, okay, is this group really this bad? And how do you start to pull out of it? Well, it starts with winning these games that you absolutely should. Again, I'm not going to call them must win, but you definitely need to win these games against the Raptors, against the Pistons, who, by the way, just got a Sore Thompson back. Cade Cunningham's been a triple-double machine. You and I were both pretty bullish on them in terms of could they push for the play-in tournament? So far, it's looking good for Detroit. But you have a lot of those types of games. I think your next 11 or 13 between now and when you play the Boston Celtics again. The toughest opponent on that schedule is what? Maybe the Houston Rockets, who, Pacers too. But the Rockets are 7-4, and by the numbers, the Rockets, I believe, are in the top 10 in offense and defense. They've been tremendous so far, but that's what we're talking about. It's not 4 against the Cavs and the Celtics combined. So now is the time to start to dig out of this. I was talking with someone else, and we were just talking about this stretch and said, I think you've got to go like 10-3, 9-4, something like that. Otherwise, it's big trouble. And they kind of push back. It's still early. Like, you don't have to hit a certain record. Like, no, I get that, but I don't think the East is going to be this bunched up forever, number one. And you look at what's waiting for you in March. Like,
that schedule in March.
If you are still 500-ish or below 500 as we're getting into January, like, that to me spells real trouble. So that's why these 11 or so games are extremely important.
They are. And just to let everybody know what the next slate of games are for the Bucks until they see Boston again for the last time this season on December 6th. Here is the upcoming Bucks schedule: Toronto, Detroit, Charlotte,
home road,
Houston, Chicago, Indiana, Charlotte, Miami, Washington, Detroit, Atlanta, and then Boston. So like there are some teams in there again where you should feel all right about the Bucks' chances of coming out in that game and winning. But again, based on what you've seen this season, if there are fans who are like, I don't even have faith in them doing something in that stretch, I get it because they haven't shown you too much. But one thing in particular that I'm looking for with the Bucks, and Giannis has mentioned it as well, wanting to see them get more threes up. Got to get more threes up. Modern NBA, like get the math problem right. And I was just kind of looking into that and saw they're currently 15th in three-point shot frequency. The Bucks haven't been 15th or worse in quite some time. Like they were 4th last year, 4th the year before that, 6th the year before that, 12th, 4th, 3rd. So like looking over the last 6 seasons before this one, like the idea of them being 15th in three-point rate was unheard of. And a little bit of that thinking of like who they're playing, Andre Jackson Jr. in the lineup, Giannis, but you still have your Dame, you have Brooke, you have Gary Trent Jr. who hasn't been going yet, which I think tonight against the Raptors with no Dame is a good place for him to get going if he's in the lineup. So they got to do better with the three-point shot as well offensively to help open things up, especially setting the other guys up with Dame and Giannis getting the other guys some good looks from three. So if that three ball can start falling a bit more for them offensively as well, that's something that I'm looking for, that frequency of that shot for the Bucks.
Yeah, there's a few numbers I do want to touch on both sides of the ball with this team that we need to see movement on. It does sound as though Gary Trent Jr. is going to play. Same for Giannis, same for Andre Jackson Jr. So it's Dame and concussion protocol and Khris Middleton who remains out for this group. We'll take a look at those numbers and this game, the first of 11, what we think to be big ones. 11 games against teams that you should frankly win a majority of those games, and 8 of the 11 are at home. So we'll get into that conversation coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So a couple of the numbers that jumped out to me the most, you just touched on one of them, and that is, man, we talk about the struggles of this offense. It is not moving in the right direction that you want, not just statistically, but the shot profile. It's, Doc has said we want layups and dunks and threes, but they're among the league leaders in mid-range attempts, turnarounds, like
with no Khris Middleton.
With no Khris Middleton. And look, as we pointed to the issues with the defense, you cannot play that way with that defense, especially. But in this league, you cannot lose the math equation every single night. Like some nights you'll have the talent to make up for it, but most nights you will not. And if your defense is running to the issues that it is, you're especially not going to make up for it. So I think that has been a big issue of where are all these shots coming from, and why is this, the offense for this team? We talk about teams like the Chicago Bulls who are starting to man, look at the volume of threes that the Bulls are putting up in a game, and that the Bucks, as of this moment, are 19th in 3-point attempts per game. I'm stunned, Camille, that they're 16th in 3-point percentage in this game, in this season. That, wow, they've actually made enough to be close to midway in the season, but 19th in terms of attempts. That right there is not good enough. You need to be in the top 10 and frankly, even more than that in your 3-point attempts with the makeup of this group.
You absolutely do. You really do. And the mid-range part of it was so interesting to me without Khris Middleton being there, because that's what he's known for. And remember when Doc came in and there was a little bit of a butting of the heads with Khris wanting to take more mid-range shots that he's been used to, and Bud being like, no, I need you to take more threes, and then them finding a happy medium eventually over the years. But the Giannis mid-range, I know that's been a big conversation for a lot of people. He's not shooting it at a bad clip. And for Giannis to take mid-rangers over the threes that we have seen, like, I'm not necessarily mad at that, but maybe just not as many, or if they're not falling, do something else in the game plan. But offensively, again, I think part of it too is just trying to set people up for success. Like, I think about Taurean Prince when he said that he signed here and he wanted to see the assists that other guys were getting based off of what Dame and Khris and Giannis were able to draw, so he could be ready to shoot. When he gets in those catch and shoot situations from three, he's been lights out. Taurean Prince has been doing his thing. How do you generate more shots for him? Need more 3-point shots? How do we run more actions for an AJ Green, especially in situations where Dame is being top locked, or they're not letting Dame get the ball? What other actions can this Bucks team get into offensively? Because sometimes they stall when their first or second action is taken away. Then it's like, what do we do now? So they have to get better at the offensive flow as well, of trying to find the best shots, as well as not being too selfless at times where you have an open look, you hesitate, pass it to somebody else thinking they can get a better shot. And it's like, that was already the shot that you should have taken. Bobby is one of those people in particular who I think about with that, where it's like, you've had some really open looks from three that, I would like for you to take, but you pass them up, you pass it, or you run in for like a jump hook or something like that. Like, just take the shot. So we'd love to see more emphasis on that too when the Bucks are getting into their actions. But I mean, you look at the Raptors team that's coming in tonight, injury depleted. Like, I don't know if even Quigley is playing. Like, I know he just came back recently. I know he's questionable. There's no Scotty Barnes available for the Raptors tonight.
Yeah. So Barnes, Bruce Brown, and Kelly Olynyk are all out. Quigley is questionable.
Yeah. So, like, again, this is not going to be a full-strength Raptors team coming into Fiserv Forum tonight. This is a great game, and the Raptors team also that defensively has not been great. So this has all the makings of a classic get-right game for the Bucks, even if Dame isn't there. But just find the shot. Just kind of get that offense going a bit.
Yeah, and, you look when you talk about the shot diet and embracing change. Phoenix Suns are in the top 5 in makes and attempts from threes.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Dunn is taking 4 threes a game and shooting 36%, when we had so many conversations over the summer about the intrigue of him as a prospect. But man, can you work with that offense? Well, overnight, Ryan Dunn's become a shooter. Yusuf Nurkic and Tyus Jones both taking career highs in 3-point attempts per game. I mean, it's seeing what the Bulls did. It's seeing all these teams that have embraced what has basically become Missoula ball of, doesn't matter, like, if it's earlier or not, just get threes up, because that is what's going to be the ultimate differentiator. The other numbers defensively for this team, this to me, these are the biggest issues. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but where the Bucks are coming up short is areas, at least one area they've dominated in the past. The numbers are okay, but Bucks opponents are shooting 6% higher at the rim than what the league averages. The volume of attempts, I believe, is down. But what that tells me, it's two-pronged. Number one, well, there's just more threes that are being taken, and especially against this Bucks team. But also it tells me, okay, if the attempts are down, but man, they're shooting at a higher clip than we've seen with this group before, well, they're getting quality looks then. So it's either uncontested or blow-bys, whatever it is, that's what they're getting, dunks and layups. The other one is corner threes.
Yes.
Only the Wizards and I think the Jazz, it was just 2 teams that allowed as many attempts and makes from the corner per game as the Bucks do. I know Doc talked after the Celtics game about overhelping and things like that. Like, it can be overhelps, but what's the biggest way to get corner threes? We saw this with Drew Holiday when the Bucks are very good at generating them. You touch the paint, make the defense react, and you kick out the corner. That has clearly been an issue for the Bucks so far this season, is containing at the point of attack. this season and last season, but
Mhm.
the volume of these corner threes is alarming. And, at one point in the game against the Celtics, I think it was early in the third quarter. I remember looking it up, and the Celtics already had 13 attempts from the corner. The league average is about 9 per game. And the Celtics were up to, now that's what they finished with, but up to 13 early in the second half.
Again, the Bucks got a lot of things to clean up. Like I feel like that's what this episode all in itself comes down to. The 2-8 Bucks have a lot to clean up, and most people are like, "Well, duh, they're 2-8." But when you look at all the different pieces and places where this team needs improvement, the question is, do you think that they can do it with what they have in house? And one thing that Doc has turned to is just some of the young guys on the roster. Like, what can you generate? So I think in this game, especially with no Dame, you're going to see a lot more Ryan Rollins tonight. Do we see DeLon Wright find his way back into the lineup after seeing, Rollins jump frog him and take those minutes, given the fact that there's no Dame? Is this a chance for Wright to try to, get back into the rotation somehow? One thing I will say too about the roster in itself is that it does feel like it's an open competition for minutes, where it's like, if you can come out here and show that you can execute the way that we need you to, we're going to find a place for you in the rotation. And we've seen the minutes for some guys fall. We've heard Doc, as I mentioned, say Wright has just fallen out of the rotation in itself, but they have to try to find something in this time period now to generate something for this team going forward. Because again, you're playing a Raptors team tonight after you're 2-8. It's the next 10-game stretch now for the Bucks where they need to try to turn it around. And you're playing a Raptors team that's among the league worst defensively, among the league worst in offense. Like, they're just overall have not been a great team so far this season. So we've seen this team last year in these situations. We've seen this team this year in situations against teams where you're like, you need to beat them. You should beat them. On paper, everything lines up for you to do so if you see yourself as the contender team that we believe you can be. And for me, it's this next stretch of games in particular that I'm really focusing in on, because the first 10, yeah, it's early. You're figuring things out. Woo, hasn't gone as great as we wanted, but it's still early. Now, this next stretch of games is when it starts to get dark if you cannot find a way to start getting some victories. Like, if once we get Thanksgiving approaching December, if you're still finding yourself at the bottom of the East at this point, like, it's really time to start to figure something else out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again. Like, you have to be an active participant in your own rescue, and that's the point where we're at. Things are seldom as good as it looks, and same with as bad as it seems. But it doesn't mean you can just sit back and wait for Khris and like, oh well, we'll start hitting some of these. Like, well, when we get Khris back and when we start to hit some of these shots, like, that'll help. But there's more work that needs to be put into this now. On the positive front, as we start to wind down here, I mean, AJ Green, I think, is the league leading shooter from 3 right now. I don't think he's attempted a 2 this season.
It's been all 3s.
There's that. I think we loved what we saw from Ryan Rollins and his competitiveness. I remember talking about it on the broadcast too. He has a 6'10" wingspan. Like, that's going to keep you in plays a lot. And just how he grew within the game, even, and figuring out how to defend and stay with Peyton Pritchard. There's a lot of bright spots that we're seeing from Ryan Rollins. Now, you mentioned, does it open the door for DeLon Wright back in the rotation? It's usually things like this that do, with players missing time. If I had to guess, Camille, I kind of think Pat Connaughton starts at point guard tonight.
The Pat Connaughton love. Listen, love from Doc. Say the Pat Connaughton love from Doc. And Pat Connaughton is somebody who has been polarizing for this fan base. Someone who I even thought, like, hey, if we need to find minutes for AJ Green, let's take him from Pat or something like that. Yeah. But he trusts Pat with the ball in his hands to initiate, to try to play make. I won't say that Pat's been great at it, but he hasn't been terrible either. It's been one of those things where it's been a mixed bag at times, but they're going to need a good performance for him if he's going to continue to get that play time. But if he doesn't play well, then he is somebody who I don't think is above also getting those minutes snatched eventually, but someone else has to come and take them at the same time.
I mean, it's a larger conversation for another show, but I don't think Pat Connaughton has been horrendous this year. I mean, he has played like a back of the rotation type of guy. Like if he's your 9th or 10th guy, he's had obviously some moments that haven't been so great. I think he's had some good moments so far this season. He's had at least, and I know it's part of the conversation, but he's had at least 3 games, I would say, this year. That was a pretty good game from Pat Connaughton. He does some things that nobody else in this group does. He's the guy that he has chemistry with Giannis, and he has the ability to attack the paint and get in there and find some of those looks for his teammates, which outside of Dame and outside of Giannis, nobody else is doing here. So I think between that and his improved ball handling, that's why he continues to see a lot of these minutes. But again, you have larger problems than Pat Connaughton. Like if he's your 10th man and if you're healthy and Taurean Prince is also taking some of those minutes off the bench, like things look a lot different. But if I had to guess, I would probably lean towards Pat Connaughton starting this game, because I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong on this front, I don't think you're just going to throw Ryan Rollins in the starting lineup. And it's kind of a big leap to go from we have pulled you out of the rotation and replaced you with Ryan Rollins to 3 games later, okay, DeLon Wright, you're back in and you're starting tonight. That I don't know if that's going to be the case. So, yeah, I guess it's wait and see mode for what we find out with these lineups tonight. But yeah, it's a favorable schedule in terms of the home road split and the teams that are on this, but you got to do something with that. And these are the types of teams we've seen the Bucks struggle against the last year plus now. So the only way out is through it, and that's where this team currently finds themselves. Any closing thoughts on a 2-8 start to start the season?
My closing thought is about the Bucks, not about the Bucks. It's more so about the Locked On Bucks YouTube page. I saw that we crossed 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube page, and I want to say thank you to all the everydayers, to everybody who's joining us live in the comments, whether you agree with us or you don't. Just the love for the Milwaukee Bucks and the support that we've been getting has been fantastic. Just want to shout out everybody who's been listening, who's been tapping in, leaving comments, joining the lives on the YouTube side of things. 10K is a big milestone to celebrate. So I just want to shout out everybody who has been supporting the pod. And if you're on the audio side and haven't joined over on the YouTube side, come on, give us that subscription as well. So I'll end it on that note here. And hopefully there is a positive post-game episode tonight after Raptors Bucks, the first NBA Cup game.
Yeah, hopefully positive the next few games. Here with the Raptors tonight and the NBA Cup. We didn't even touch on that. We'll get to see the court and everything else, but the Raptors tonight, the Pistons tomorrow, the Hornets on Saturday. And Doc even said, yeah, I mean, look what the NBA Cup did for the Pacers last year. So maybe we can get the same thing out of this. Again, that's not the type of conversation you hope to be having right now, but it's the reality of the situation. That'll do it for today's show. Back again later tonight with the post-game show, hopefully recapping a win and a 3-8 start to the season for the Milwaukee Bucks. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.